Again, thanks everybody for coming out. My name is Joe Brancoli. I am the chair of the Sierra Club Falls of the James Group. That's the local group in the Richmond area and surrounding counties. And we are very, very pleased tonight to present this program with, as I said, our three excellent speakers. We're not going to waste time getting to the speakers. We will bring them on in less than 60 seconds. And then afterwards we will have announcements, and we would invite everybody to stick around for refreshments afterward, after the program ends. And we will take questions after the three speak. We're going to begin tonight with Glen Besa, then we're going to move on to Shippee, and end up with Shippee. This is the order we're going to go in, and then there will be questions. So, I will first introduce Mr. Glen Besa. He has served at the highest ranks as both a volunteer and a staff person with the Sierra Club. He was director of the Virginia chapter, director of the state Sierra Club, until his retirement in May 2016. Glen is still active, still on our executive committee of our local group, and he is very active with the Beyond Methane campaign in Richmond. He serves as Environmental and Climate Justice Chair of the Chesterfield County NAACP, and last year he helped found the Friends of Chesterfield, an organization which is focused on preventing Dominion's construction of a new gas-fired power plant in Chesterfield County. Let's bring up our first speaker and give a warm round of applause, Mr. Glen Besa.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay. So we had a request for this program because when it comes to the issue of climate change, we have a serious challenge in front of us. And the question is, what are the solutions? And there are a number of people who believe that nuclear power may be one of the solutions to generate clean energy. And so we thought it would be appropriate to have a conversation about nuclear energy, not just because it's in the general conversation, but it's also in the very much the specific conversation with regard to issues like North Anna 3, which was proposed to be built here, and the whole issue of small modular reactors that we talked about a little bit as well. So I would like to first talk about the Syracuse position on nuclear power. And I have to say, it's not exactly opposed to nuclear power, but you can read it that way. So let's just go into it. This is opposed to the licensing, construction, and operation of new nuclear reactors utilizing efficient process pending, and this is really important, pending the resolution of significant safety problems inherent in reactor operations, disposal of spent fuels, nuclear waste, and possible diversion of nuclear materials capable of weapons manufacturing. Next slide, please. Okay, and then there's another part to it too. And we're pending the establishment of adequate regulatory machinery to guarantee adherence to the foregoing conditions. The above resolution does not apply to research reactors. So, hey, if they can solve these problems, maybe nuclear is a solution. And you can see this goes back to 74. 2016 was revised, and there's some other policies I'll talk about later. Next slide, please. Okay, so I broke this down into four major areas of concern: safety, nuclear waste, security, and cost. With regard, I'm going to check the time here, I don't want to talk too long. With regard to safety, these three names just kind of like bring it right up for you, okay? 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima, they really raise the specter of great concern with regard to safety. You know, the industry is not too sure about this technology either, because the liability is so potential, so large, that they actually, in 1957, to encourage nuclear power, the Congress adopted the Price-Anderson Act that basically says, you know, if you blow things up, not a nuclear bomb, but if you have a serious nuclear accident, and the damages exceed $15 billion, then the taxpayers will step in and pick up the cost, okay? And so they can insure up to about $15 billion, and then after that, we get stuck with the bill. Obviously, why are these three issues of concern to us? Because of the potential health impacts of nuclear power, nuclear radiation. There really isn't any known safe exposures. Certainly we go get x-rays, we have radiation therapy, Nuclear power plants actually do leak small amounts of radioactive gases and liquids. Apparently, from what I read, if you live within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, it might be, if it's running well, I guess that's one reactor, it's about the equivalent of 1 mammogram or a couple airplane flights in terms of radiation. But of course, everybody's being exposed to that. Okay, so obviously the safety, and that's under normal operations. So we're concerned about nuclear accidents that could release a lot of radiation, as we know happened in Chernobyl, and there were serious problems still there. Fukushima still haven't resolved the problems there. Okay, 3 Mile Island, they want to reopen the reactor. Actually, not the one that melted down, the other reactor that was closed recently. So safety is a big issue, and the health issues related to it. The other issue I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about security for just a second. Okay, so security. We have a large nuclear reactor in North Anna. Okay, if you ever go out there, the fences are pretty far away from the reactor. I mean, you can't get very close to that place. So security is a real concern because the last thing we want is some kind of attack on our reactors. And so for that reason, we're extremely concerned about security. And so that's why I think the nuclear industry in our country with regard to the reactors has done a pretty good job of keeping attacks on reactors to a minimum. Obviously, we've not heard any. But then you've got to move nuclear waste back and forth. And so it's not so much the issues of explosions or meltdowns, but the issues of dirty bombs, for example. If somebody gets a hold of those radioactive materials, they can just set off a standard explosion in a dense populated area and expose a lot of people to radiation. So security is a real big issue, not just with regard to the plant and its operation, but with regard to the way we handle the waste. And in that regard, I just want to say that, Bob was going to talk about small modular reactors and micro reactors, but if you're really concerned about security in terms of not letting any terrorists or crazy people get near one of these things, then this concept that you keep hearing in the news about small modular reactors on the campus of a college or on a hospital grounds to provide that power, it doesn't really compute with me, because obviously if you're very concerned about security, you don't want to have fissionable materials accessible to anyone, even, and that's why there's such a big fence around North Anna 3. Okay? So security is another issue we're concerned about. Nuclear waste. I have to tell you a story. When I went to law school back in the 70s, okay, I was in Maryland. I'm from Maryland. Okay, we have the Calvert Cliff nuclear reactor. Back at the time that thing was built, there was a state law that said nuclear waste, spent rods, etc., spent waste, could not be maintained on the grounds for more than 5 years. You have to, whatever you had to move it off within 5 years, right? Well, in the course of, shortly after I got out of law school, I actually wrote a paper on this, that's why I'm familiar with it. They had to repeal that law. They kept extending it, and then they repealed it. Because you know where that nuclear waste is? There, from 1970s? It's still on the grounds of Calvert Cliff. And you know where all the waste is from North Anna and Surrey nuclear power plants? Anybody know where that is?
On the ground there.
It's still on the grounds, right, right, because they've not found a successful way to get rid of it. And so there have been some suggestions, deep mines in places like Utah, but nobody wants it. And so they define it as sort of a political problem. In other words, we could solve this problem if it wasn't just the politics of it. But in all honesty, it is a highly technical problem, because the half-life of some of these products are thousands of years. And bottom line is, we've never kept anything secure for 1,000 years. We don't know how to do it. So there are serious technical issues and challenges associated with managing nuclear waste, in addition to the political problem that nobody really wants it there. And when it comes to nuclear waste, there's also the issue of transplanting it. You've got, I think there's something like 75 different sites around the country that generate nuclear waste in 35 different states, here in Virginia. We haven't dealt with this successfully. Now, there are some places that take low-level nuclear waste, but the highly radioactive waste associated with spent rods and other purposes is basically sitting where it was created for the most part. Okay, so nuclear waste is a serious issue, and I'll just say, apparently, because the federal government had agreed to solve this problem and never did, the nuclear industry sued us, the federal government, American people, and won. So right now, we are paying $500 million a year to maintain that waste, at North Anna, Surrey, Capitol Cliffs, etc. So another bill to the taxpayers associated with nuclear industry. And the last thing I want to chat about is cost, okay? Stay there, don't move yet, go back. Cost, okay? So we know about cost. Bottom line, there hasn't been a nuclear power plant that's been built that hasn't exceeded the estimated cost, usually doubled them. And in that case, Vogtle, which is a plant that opened 2 reactors just opened in Georgia. It took 15 years to build, I think twice as long as projected. It cost $36 billion, which was, again, more than twice what it was projected to cost, okay? And now there's a big dispute in Georgia as to who's going to pay. The ratepayers are going to pay. But in all honesty, that cost is going to be spread among the ratepayers in Georgia, which is going to be a significant increase in cost. I want to mention the Vernon Summer plant too. That's the one in South Carolina that was started construction and then never completed. They spent $9 billion, almost $10 billion on that project, and then it never went forward because of a lot of problems. In fact, there are some people in jail right now because of fraud associated with that project because they kept misleading the public and the regulators as to the status of that project. Serious problem. Here in Virginia, we spent in South Carolina, they characterized it as digging the hole, charging us $10 billion for it, okay, and then filling the hole back up. In Virginia, we absorbed the cost of $500 million, $500 million, for the North Anna 3 reactors, and they never even turned spade and dirt. At least they turned the dirt over in South Carolina. They never turned spade and dirt over, and we spent $500 million, $500 million, $500 million, on that reactor licensing process, and it was never built. I don't have my glasses on. How much time I got?
1 minute.
Okay, all right. So obviously, cost is a serious issue too, and we haven't even built a small modular reactor yet, so we don't even know what the cost that's going to be. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Sierra Club has a very formal process of adopting policies. There's a website, you can look at all the different policies we have on nuclear power. So I just wanted to give that to you. And then the next slide, please. In fact, if you go on Google and just Google Sierra Club policy nuclear, that'll pop up. Okay. Yes, climate change is a really problem. We need to address it ASAP. Okay. But as Mark Jacobson, a physicist, actually a professor at Stanford, has said in his book and before that, we have the technology. We just need to deploy it at scale. And so there are other solutions to climate change besides nuclear. If we can solve all these problems with nuclear, then maybe it is a part of the solution. But until we do, we need to be spending all this money solving a problem by investing in solar and wind and batteries and other forms of storage. And we'll take questions after we finish this presentation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. And thank you all. Next up will be Shippee. And as Shippee is the Nuclear Engineering Program Director at VCU, he is also an Engineering Foundation Professor and a licensed professional engineer, as are a number of you in the audience tonight, I believe. His research focuses on nuclear fuel separation and safeguarding technologies. He has established labs at VCU, secured over $5 million in funding for more than 20 projects. He has taught over 25 classes, some of his students are here tonight, and published over 50 peer-reviewed papers. He holds a PhD and a BS in chemical engineering and nuclear engineering, respectively, from University of Maryland, College Park. Let's also give a warm welcome, Shippee.
Yes, I'm hoping the vision here a little bit about
about our nuclear. The top one right there, actually from Freeway, which is kind of like a leading push in terms of nuclear, how we can blend with nature itself. The two in the left and right here, those are from Oklo, which is another nuclear company that kind of like a leading front in as well, to blend in again, understanding about the nature. And the last one, actually in the middle here, super cool idea, and it's still currently going on right now, is at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, which get a lot of support from Illinois campaign, to actually now they're launching a lot of the advanced test reactor site that will be there. So they actually have the reactor underneath the old building here. Oh wow. Okay, so safety issue. I was at the I think I was in France, and then I actually stepped close to Picasso. And suddenly there's something like, come on. And that's kind of like a very unique way of using nuclear as heating tool as a heat exchanger types. So kind of like want to open that, kind of like showing how nuclear, we have vision, we have loving of the environment. Next slide, please. Yes. So a little bit brief background. The reason I show this background is because I love nature. I like a lot of outdoor activities. And when I was young, about like 18 to about like, let's say, when about 18, I actually drove down to Florida. And I drove down to Florida and I saw a pile of trash during that time from Maryland, and then kind of like went to see the football game. So, and once I did that, it's kind of like turned to me, go like, what should I do? And then suddenly go to college, and suddenly one thing that I hear a lot is about nuclear, and I wouldn't use the term waste anymore. I call them nuclear byproducts. And the reason of that is, yes, I'll explain to you later on. And that gave me interested in nuclear. And the reason of that is I've really been exploring that since then up to now, is to solve that issue. And definitely I always ask for your support, and that's why I'm here too, when you're asking, because Sierra bring the one vision that share with me is about care of nature. And nuclear fuel contains so much of good material that left over that we sit it there, and Glen was just mentioned, we actually store it there at the North Anna Syracuse Power Station. 96% of it still being recyclable, but due to the fact that we all worry, and then go to the infinity, we don't get a chance to actually use that 96% of that useful stuff that's sitting on there, and then we go like, well, we waste our tax, it's my tax money too, and I've been working on it to get up on that. And that's kind of like the idea that it's been driving my goal for the past over 20 years now, trying to lead into that front of understanding what we call nuclear separation. And that's a big tool. Now, let me ask the audience here, how many people here, when you go to a party at someone's house or your friend, you actually stay afterward and help people clean? Can you raise your hand? Like help cleaning, in this case, don't put the dish in the dishwasher, but actually help to pull out trash, do all this stuff, instead of just saying, good party, and say, bye-bye. Typically, that's the thing about me in my research field too. When I told my student, would you like to actually separate the nuclear byproducts? How do you do it? In a hot temperature field, but you know, it's super fun. After a while, they're gonna go like, can we have a computer project? I wanna create nuclear. I wanna create power. Why do we have to do this? And that's the story that I kind of like get all my students to be interested in. So there's a 96% of things that you can actually use, and we need scientists, we need an engineer who understand that. And that's part of my path that hopefully I will be able to enjoy all of this activity along with the fact that we have nuclear. Go to the next slide, please. Oh, okay, so I just want to tell you in general here that this is just a demographic kind of like information. I know you have been seeing it already several times. One thing I want to point out is I'm so interested, and when well, you can see the story already. I was in Idaho. I was in Idaho for 10 years because I'm looking for nature and nuclear, and Idaho National Lab was there. Argonne West was there too. So I want to do, and they all store nuclear byproducts. So those are my way of interest, and I stay in that area of that research. But then I got so super excited to come to Virginia. Because one thing that's so unique about Virginia, if you look to the bottom left, is national average around 2022 and up to now, it's about 19 to 20% electricity run by nuclear. But when you actually come to the state of Virginia, you can be so proud to say that you're in the top 5 or 6 in the country that actually have the nuclear run 30% by North Anna and Surrey nuclear power station. That means it's almost equivalent to when actually you run a toaster oven, and when we have the American Nuclear Society Student Conference back in 2019, we actually say, if you don't like nuclear, don't put your bread in the toaster oven. Because that consumes the same amount of energy when you toast, and then Hamilton get a little bit upset, and now they improve. It's actually down to about 20% now. So you now can actually, if you don't like nuclear, you can toast it as well. So in that case. But mainly it's like 30% in Virginia is actually run by nuclear. Illinois, as an example on the first slide, 50% run by nuclear. And that's a big key component. And guess what? Anyone know the percent of nuclear coming from nuclear electricity in France? 75 to 80%. And that will be the story that we can talk afterward, because surprisingly, I cannot do it myself. I need you. I need everyone in this room. I need just not, because it cannot come from me. Because the moment I open my mouth and talk about it, everyone will go like, how long have you been a nuclear engineer? And I'll say, over 15, 20 years. Nope, we don't want to hear your opinion anymore. You're biased toward nuclear. You know, but if I have my daughter talk about nuclear, they will listen to my daughter, which is several of her friends know that I'm like, several of her friends know she had a nuclear dad. And that's not being the case, and then that kind of the story. But mainly, the key component is right at that corner right there. Recycling and separation. It's a question mark. The question mark of that is the fact that when are we getting there? That's a big key component. The big key component is when we need people to be interested in that area. It's like the question that I'm asking you a moment ago is, would you like to go to the party, create the party event, or would you like to clean up the event afterward and be kind of like behind the scene, doing all the work, don't get any appraisal of anything? That's very hard. I enjoy it, but at the same time, sometimes my wife says, why are you doing this? You know, you don't get like kind of like big publicizing, like some of my friends who do nuclear power generation, come up with a fancy reactor design. All I do is, I'll clean the byproducts. I'll do the separation. So that's a story that we have. So that's a big key component right there. Next slide, please. One thing about safety in nuclear, I can tell you right away, this is an extremely good example of the project, South Texas project. In 2017, by the hurricane coming in, only one that still stand alive. I mean, kind of like running. Except Texas has issue, power grid, right? And we know that. And the reason why it didn't work on power grid, because everybody always disagreed. Everyone wants piece of pie. So when you put a lot of things together, it's a collapse. So power grid is another thing. Power grid cannot be solved by nuclear either. Power grid needs to be solved by every engineer. And that's a big key. And in the end, it has to tap with electrical engineering. And a lot of electrical engineers, when you talk to them, they don't know nuclear. And so that's another story of kind of like the thing that's going on. Next slide, please. Another part of it is James Hansen, when my student kind of like talk to me, like, do you know that he's my idol? Is the reason why is that is the fact that I feel the same way. When I was in my bachelor degree at Maryland, I was nuclear engineer. Kind of like changed my mind after reading through a lot of this, is the fact that I changed to chemical engineer. I actually pursued my PhD in chemical engineer on separation, two-phase flow separation, and then liquid-liquid interaction. The reason of that is to be able to solve the nuclear issue on separation. And that's a big key. So I decided to pursue more and kind of like blind myself, enjoying it in the chemical engineer, and then come back to nuclear, try to teach, and now I'm in mechanical and nuclear, try to expand even more horizon in that area, and hopefully several of my students were like, do we really have to learn chemistry? Every time they join my team, it's just that's the key, because once you do, everything is kind of like in combination. So it's kind of like, this is very important because nuclear can really help reduce the greenhouse emission, but cannot do alone. It needs all the elements together in one set. Next slide, please. Another one that was mentioned that was kind of like neat is the fact that why open 3 Mile Islands again? Definitely, once you have the data center opening, data minings and all the data center that we have, especially Virginia been pushing as well to be one of the premier in that section, we will need a lot of power. And nuclear will be able to provide you a base load power. The base load power in this case means constant supply of power into that. Definitely you can rely on solar. Don't get me wrong that if you're in a big field and nothing there, because you cannot print everything on nuclear, so you have solar. So I have another friend that recently like bought a cabin up in near Shenandoah and asked me like, what should I put there? I go like, put solar. He's like, you're nuclear. They go like, do cost calculation, and it's much more preferable that way. So the key here, the fact that Pennsylvania needs to do it, is you're looking at that, and we cannot fully rely on the natural gas. We're gonna have natural gas, but we cannot drain all of it like the way we did to coal, and to all sorts of other energy, petroleum type. But now you can see nuclear is 29, and that's where the big push comes in play. The big push is the fact that we need something to help fully support and balance the portfolio, because the portfolio right now is very obsolete. It's either one or another. You cannot rely on things like that. That's what will happen in Texas again. So the reason of the 3 Mile Island is being open is not the fact that we have to do nuclear. It's about to reduce the percentage, and eventually the portfolio will not look like bimodal. It will look more like Gaussian distribution. Next slide, please. And then I kind of like want to point this out. This is the amount of the nuclear waste, and this is our double-edged prongs. We always show this picture. This picture is so cool. I always tell students, we can fit all the volume of the nuclear waste into one football field. When you tell that, and then when you actually drive to Virginia Beach, you see the trash land. And all these places, think about all our delegates would think. Go like, yeah, we can wait. And that's the reason that you've been mentioning, like, why are we keep storing all this nuclear byproduct there in the field and don't do anything? And why the company, like Dominion Energy, doesn't do anything either? Because that's the reason we have. It's a selling reason, and at the same time become double-edged prongs. In the end, the thing that's sad, very sad to me the most, is most people don't know 96% is recyclable. We should wait for you, but we need support from policy. We need Sierra Club, and when I look through your policy, I go like, we can work. If we work together and limit that, get rid of the term waste, I don't like it, because they're all byproduct. They're good product that wait for you to work on it. And that's a big key. Next slide. And in the end, this goofy, might go a little bit over 1 minute here, but it's our nuclear waste policy in 1982 that suffered us. But, to be quite frankly, we still have about over $43 billion to be in research. And I need next generation to go like, I want to do research in nuclear separation. We need to push in that direction. And then if the team go together, we'll just be able to actually invent those as safety. And when we understand the separation, that means you understand in cooking, you don't have to worry, you can control your safety that way. And then espionage and all those stuff will be kind of like a book pattern that you actually learn and understand the whole process. And this is our future right here. It's kind of like, I kind of like happy and sad in the end that we kind of like success and failure in a sense. But in the end, it's need you, not just me. And I can tell you, not so many people do nuclear separation when you go to different universities. And currently we only have 29 nuclear engineering programs in the country. And imagine that we have limited, and recently they came out and say, we really need more radiochemists. We really need more people who do separation chemistry, separation engineering. But everyone wants to go into power development. And that's a big component. So Sierra Club been talking a lot about the nuclear byproducts. I'm pretty sure we can raise more awareness and get people to actually stay after the party. And I hope to help you stay after the party today. I volunteer my water. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Shippee, very much. And let me just say, it is not fair to bring your daughter here. All right. We are going to continue with our third speaker tonight. We have just heard two speakers who talked about the broad contours of nuclear energy and policy. Now we have a speaker who's going to look specifically at our situation in Virginia, because just during this calendar year, there are developments in Virginia. Governor Glen Youngkin. Thank you, very true. And powerful Democratic leaders in the General Assembly have promoted and passed legislation to set things in motion with small modular reactors, SMRs. And here to discuss this is Bob Shippee, our chair of the State Chapter Legislative Committee. He is also an at-large ExCom member of the state chapter. He is our state PAC treasurer and chapter treasurer, and he is a lead volunteer lobbyist during General Assembly sessions. He is vice chair of the Henrico Electoral Board and currently on the Henrico Planning Commissioner. Please welcome Bob Shippee.
Hello all. Don't you love that picture? When I started doing this work 10 years ago, that's the way I look. This is a bad look. Appreciate Glenn and Shippee giving, like Joe said, kind of the high-level framing of this issue. The club does have a nuanced position on nuclear. I mean, we did not oppose the extending of the licenses to the existing Virginia nuclear plants by Dominion. A lot of mixed opinions about that, but we kind of stayed out of it. So we're not strictly, anti-nuclear on its face. But what do? I work with allies in our legislative committee, which is a couple of members in this room. We work with allies to try to affect good policy in the General Assembly. This year, and that's difficult sometimes because other organizations might have a little different perspective than what we have on nuclear or many other issues. So I wanted to highlight, we can probably go to the next slide. By the way, Joe is giving me way too much credit. A lot of those things on that page are things that I've done over a period of years. I'm not like the treasurer and the elections board today, but I got plenty on my plate. So when I left Capital One 10 years ago, I said I'm going to do no more PowerPoint slides if I can help it at all. So you will see this horrible looking just Word document, and you won't really have to read it because I'll be giving you the highlights from it. But what I wanted to kind of go through is, given what we've heard, what is the current policy question for Virginia? What are we seeing today? And as Joe mentioned, we saw several nuclear-related bills proposed in January of this year. This is an issue that is of great interest to legislators across the aisle. And there's a lot of different angles you can take. What it basically boiled down to after lots of arguments and compromises were two bills that kind of worked along the process and ended up passing the General Assembly. And after a little bit of amendment, actually is now law in Virginia. So I wanted to talk about those, and then I'll pull back up and talk about a little bit higher level, what are some of the dynamics that led us here, and where do we probably go from here. So these small modular nuclear reactors, it's kind of a cute phrase that's been made up over the last couple of years. It makes you think of, maybe there could be a nuclear reactor behind that vent. It's small, it's modular. or maybe it looks like your air conditioner outside your house. Well, that's not it. It's basically like a nuclear submarine above ground. That's kind of what it is. But I mean, there's lots of different designs out there, and we can talk about one that's been tried recently. But these are effectively, it's just another name for another nuclear reactor. And I'm not saying that as good or bad. That's really, I think, what we're really talking about here. So there was a House bill patroned by Israel Quinn, a Republican from the western part of the state. This bill, both of these bills that you see up here went through many gyrations, but this one ended up applying to Appalachian Power, which is one of our 2 investor-owned utilities in Virginia. It's primarily south and west part of the state. It allows, both these bills are pretty similar in many regards, so it allows APCO, as we call them, to recover their costs for the development of a small modular nuclear reactor of up to 500 megawatts. So again, that's actually a full-size reactor. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission in DC would consider that a full-size reactor. Note that this facility could power West Virginia or Virginia. So that's a little bit different. And you know, there's an expiration date on this bill of July 1st, 2034. So that's interesting as well. Now, when that got through both chambers in the General Assembly, it went to the governor, as it has to do. And he did something interesting with this bill. He amended it to limit the exposure to ratepayers to $25 million a year, and no more than 5 years of that. So $125 million total, which is a lot of money, but it's a lot less than what this will cost. So in that way, Youngkin, and I heard the boos and the hisses, very well deserved, but in this bill, he actually did something good. So mark it down. That probably turns out to be about $2 a month on your bill, so not great, but again, a lot less than it could have been. This bill had strong bipartisan support. So, you know, I noted on the Senate side, so even though this is a House bill, it had to go over the Senate, 26-14 vote in favor. 4 Republicans, including some in APCO territory, joined 12 Democrats in voting no, and several Democrats, including some that represent Falls of the James districts, voted aye. So it really, nuclear is an issue that crosses party lines. SB 454 is the Senate bill dealing with small nuclear reactors. This was patroned by a Democrat, Dave Mars, and he's from Northern Virginia. This applies to Dominion Energy. And again, it allows cost recovery of their investment. Now, this bill's a little bit worse than the APCO one in that it allows not only recovery of site development costs, like digging the hole, like Glenn was talking about, but also construction and licensing. Those can be billions if you put those 3 activities together. And there's a nuance here that I didn't see in the APCO version, which said the company must have made a good faith effort to get money from the Federal Department of Energy before they can tap into Virginia ratepayers. This bill expires in 2029, and I kind of tried to bold that a little bit, but it didn't show up. That's really relevant because it's 2024 now, and it's unclear whether they could actually do this in 5 years. But anyway, that's the expiration. Youngkin again, shockingly, did something good when this bill got to his desk, and he limited ratepayer exposure to $1.40 a month on our bills. So that's very interesting. And again, huge bipartisan support. So here, again, it's a Senate bill, but I highlighted what happened when it went over to the House side, 68-27. Again, 4 Republicans voted nay, and meant too many Democrats to count voted aye. So it's an interesting dynamic there. So that's kind of maybe more than you wanted to know about those bills, but if you do want to know more, we'll be taking questions. But I want to pull up and talk about what are the dynamics that led us, to this point. Obviously, utilities are pushing these bills, because they like money, and these bills guarantee them money. But you know, utilities like anything that gives them money, right? So they like gas plants. They like building anything because building infrastructure gives them more money than selling us electricity. Building things gets them a higher percentage rate of return than selling us energy. So if they could, they would just build stuff and like outsource the transmission probably. So it's clear why the utilities want this. Unions want this too. They see this as jobs. You know, we have this argument about pipelines too, and you know, they want jobs, and these projects create jobs. So, and their members, I'm sure, have many different opinions on climate change or clean energy, but you know, their focus is to get their members jobs, and so that's why they favor this. Now, the jobs are kind of short term, but again, it's labor hours, which is what they're looking at. Why are the legislators all voting for this? You know, it's all over the map. You know, some of them see carbon-free power generation. I mean, that's the utilities are selling, and it's largely true that it's carbon-free. So that is a good piece of it. Some of them see the jobs, and they want to please, especially Democrats, want to please labor. And many of them, again, both sides of the aisle, want to make the utilities happy because the utilities give them money too. So, you know, look, I've got a background in economics and finance, and so I really look at the dollars and cents in all these things. And, you know, to me, regardless of what your opinion is on nuclear as an energy generation source, you've got to make the numbers work. And so when you look at the most recent attempt, or really the only American attempt at doing a modular reactor, it was out in Nevada, and it failed miserably. And this was after multiple billions of federal dollars were injected into the project to try to make it work. And they literally pulled the plug on that. And the reason why I bring that up is we are not ready in the United States to build one of these successfully in a financially viable way. The only way it could be done is through huge subsidies. What you see on those two bills is a drop in the bucket. It will require massive federal subsidies and ratepayer subsidies that go beyond. The utilities will be back with other bills. So this is not going to be the end of what comes out of our pockets if we try to do this. And my point, and why I call it a distraction here, to what we've really got to be about in fighting climate change, is that there are so many other sources that are cheaper. So again, regardless of whether you care about the environment or you care about one source versus another for any intrinsic reason, it's just flat out much more viable to put up. Even wind turbines are cheaper. Solar is much cheaper. I always talk about geothermal as an untapped resource. Batteries even are now cheaper. So why are you chasing this? I think you have to go back to those reasons I was articulating. It's not because it's the best thing. It's because various constituencies see some benefit to them. So now, and I'll kind of just close by saying, okay, these bills passed, they're law, damage was financial damage was somewhat limited. The fight really now does turn to data centers, and I think Supi mentioned that factor. We do need energy for data centers, but now we can sort of fight on that front and say, well, look, you are creating a lot of demand, but is there a way to manage that demand? And if so, then our appetite won't be so large, and maybe we won't be chasing nuclear. There's lots of ways to do that. I mentioned here that, frankly, since those companies are creating the demand, they should just pay for the generation. I mean, you know, there's talk about putting these small modular nuclear reactors next to data centers and just, you know, giving them the power directly. Well, that's probably not a very good idea, but the idea of at least virtually kind of having them in the same, behind the same fence, that you've got your generation that is paying the generation that's feeding the demand, that does make sense to me. So you'll see lots of battles on that front in the coming session and beyond. But that's pretty much it for me. I want to give you all a chance to ask all three of those questions.
Yes, with no further ado, it's time. You all probably have opinions, you might even have questions. Since we don't have a microphone, we don't have to worry about passing that around. If you're asking a question, please stand up and project your voice like our speakers have, and specify if it's for a particular speaker, and speakers, when you're answering a question, retake center stage and project the answer. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my question is, I know nothing about recycling nuclear waste. My question is there a very 25 words or less version of how it's done? And more importantly, what resources, financially as well as natural resources, are required to do it?
Let's make it very simple. You say 25 words.
Sorry, not 10.
Resource already exists. Argonne National Laboratory and also Pacific Northwest National Laboratory along with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So with all of that, already 20 words. So they already exist a separation techniques that surprisingly France adapt that using that. We call them aqueous separation. Argonne National Lab came up with another clever idea using less volume of separation called molten salt separation pyroprocessing. So both exist already, except the fact that the US is just both in the sense when you tell people to do, like when you do Purex or what we call aqueous separation, it required you deal work with organic solvent and chemistry and things like that. And definitely there are people interested in that area. Also, on another hand, my lab here at VCU actually work with molten salt. Everything is about molten salt. So things that always drive students a little bit, and we talk about it is like, hey guys, we have to work in 500 degrees Celsius. And that's it is. But once you work in 500 degrees Celsius, the volume that came out, it will be almost like 1/10 of the size of aqueous separation. That's a technique that's already exists. So definitely there exists a technology, except it's just we need the next step.
But what resources, I mean, does it use, what chemicals, I mean, I'm trying to get at what natural resources are used.
How do you scale up?
How do you scale up? We don't have, surprisingly, we don't have scale up here in the US. We don't have industrial scale separation in the US. We have it in France. France is only one in the world that currently, I did took my student, like 9 of them this summer, to visit France to see the reprocessing facility. And they all like couple, almost me myself when I walked there, I'd seen that twice already. I cried when the first time I saw it because I've been in that field. So resource-wise, the US still wait until 2050 because of all the public opinion about waste, about separating, and whether or not when we say separation or recycling, that means we increase the number of we increase the percent of uranium. And once you increase more than 20%, some way or another in the book, it's just saying that's weapons grade. And once you do that, it stops everybody, like stepping back. Even in my lab, I couldn't actually do any separation. Surprisingly, VCU is the largest one in the East Coast that we have because we run like 500 grams of working. Once you hit 1 kilogram, you have to go by the whole entire 9 yards of the whole process. But in general, bottom line, that's a niche right there. It's just kind of like we do catch-22 with ourselves. It's the fact that we're talking. But so when you ask me like, is there any industrial scale? Only one in France, another one in Russia. So that's another story. But in the end, US, we only have what we call is pilot scale, which is kind of like a smaller version. And surprisingly, the techniques that the industrial scale side in France, going on in La Hague, which is in Upper Normandy, actually from Pacific Northwest National Lab, right in our backyard. They actually adapt our techniques and then go further into it and make it, if you visit there, it's like a whole town. La Hague is like, once you visit La Hague, my student can actually point out how big they are. They're like almost like, if you think North Anna is big, the heart will throw you away onto that. It's like, and even Germany, when they stepped down from doing they went all natural, in this case renewable, currently they still have France do decommissioning of all their fuel to all their nuclear byproducts on that, and then they buy energy from France. So that's the story. So industrial resource exists. Just wait for us to actually make a final decision. Is that answering?
No, because not really.
Next,
So what-
Wait, next question.
Okay. You can ask me more, I can tell you.
Go ahead, Gil.
Gil Steckman. First of all, I want to thank the Sierra Club for everything it does. It's only through the leadership of the Sierra Club that we'll be able to address these in the long term. So, whatever we say today, Glenn, you know, thank you so much. I was excited to find out the Sierra Club supports nuclear energy, except for the engineers have to do a better job in addressing some of the technological issues of being an engineer. That's good. I'm going to sneak in 2 questions. So I'm going to make the first one yes or no, so that the focus will be on the second question. And I think both go to you. Small modular, this is the yes or no. Small modular nuclear reactors, my understanding has been that the primary justification for that, or important justification, is safety. So that's a yes/no question. You don't have to wonder why safety. Is in fact safety on the argument for small nuclear reactor, or am I just wrong? So,
Is that for me?
yeah, it's for you.
I'm
Then
not an
I'll ask my
expert
second
on it,
question.
but I think the answer is no. I think there's no safety benefit.
It's cost. It's like mass-produced automobiles.
So here's my
There
real
could be
question.
different opinions on it.
This issue is best looked at 10 years, 20 years, and 50 years from now. Right now, we have a way of living, you know, and all that's good, but the world will change as climate change has bigger impact and starts to change us. At some point, I believe we will price carbon into economics, in terms of fuel. Glenn and I have talked about this time in the past, through carbon cap and trade. How, Glenn, this may be you, it may be either of you, how do the economics change when we price carbon into our energy?
Yeah, well, actually,
Stand up, Glenn, stand up.
so there's a lot of economists who basically would like to include the cost of carbon, you know, in these productions of fossil fuels. So, for example, right now, when you're running a gas plant, it's not incorporating the actual cost of carbon in terms of its impact on the climate, for example. And right now, the EPA's estimate of that cost is something in the order of, I think, about $150 or $180 per ton, and that's pretty expensive. When they trade carbon and you're buying carbon credits and things like that, sometimes it's like 20 or 30, so it's really significantly underpriced. There's some people that believe the cost of carbon is more like $1,000 per ton. But if you incorporated that cost into the production associated with fossil fuel, then obviously solar, wind, batteries would be competitively much more advantageous. Presumably, if you factored in the nuclear and you were able to solve these other safety problems, then nuclear would be competitive too. But the problem we have is our government has refused to address the issue of the cost of carbon. But if, you know, the billions of dollars that we are going to spend as taxpayers cleaning up the mess from Helene and starting tomorrow, Milton, right? It's coming out of our pockets. That's a cost of carbon. That's a cost of carbon because it's climate change that's driving these storms, and that's just one of the costs. So the answer is the cost of carbon would make other technologies even more competitive, including nuclear. Right?
One quick add-on. In Virginia, the law has been changed to force the State Corporation Commission, which is our regulatory body here, to include social cost of carbon and other related costs when they're making their decisions. Now, they haven't really done that yet, but we have 2 new judges out of the 3, and there's indications that they are going to start following that. And of course, Sierra Club is involved in several matters before them, and we're suggesting that they at least use there is a federal guideline that's $120 a ton or something like that, and we're suggesting at least use that as a baseline, and it probably is more like 200 or more, but I just wanted to add that because Virginia may actually start doing the right thing on that.
We're actually gonna also have, when you ask a question, come up here so that you're on the recording. Come up here, Steve. Steve.
I don't feel qualified to be up here. I guess my question is for the professor. I work for a renewable energy company. We do a lot of work with EDF in France. And I believe between 2021 and currently, nuclear power output has been restricted in France in 2021, 2022, and 2023 because the baseline temperatures of water for the discharge for these reactors has been too hot, and they have been restricted as such. It could be fudging some of the details. I don't work that closely with them. I guess my question is, you mentioned that the nuclear power station in Texas, for example, was designed to withstand natural disasters. My question is probably mostly around what are the big points of failure that you are worried about with nuclear power stations as the climate progressively worsens?
If I have to respond to that, the worst thing that I'm worried the most with the fact that as the climate getting kind of like worse, the scientists came into the who cares in a sense. When I say who cares in this is, right now, if the climate change, the people who care the most right now is Florida, because Florida get hit by that. Now, if you ask people in Idaho, their response would be like, hey, how are you doing? Do you get any effect by the hurricane? You know, because you're in Virginia, and that would be the case. So when you say all of this, same likewise is coming back to is the fact that the cause and effect come in play. It's the pattern of who actually get directly affect the most during the climate change. Now, it will be a spin around again when winter start hitting. Once winter hitting, then we have the question in reverse, slightly reverse. The people who actually get deep freeze, kind of like the change, that means the northern part. Surprisingly, one thing is the fact that University of Michigan, #1 nuclear engineering school in the country, have to answer a lot of those questions in a sense like how nuclear come in play. And that will be the kind of like the thing. That means that one thing that it make the answer who care in this case is because our country is so huge. It's a very large country. It's not like when you talk about right now in Thailand, when you say typhoon is hitting, it's hitting the whole country. Everyone in the country have to care. Therefore, right now they're flooding in Thailand. What do they say? Always mean we need to start entitlement. They start to think the fact that there must be more solar because they still don't like, I can say that it's recording. Nuclear is not a big thing. Nuclear is only medical application in Thailand. Saying, but people start worrying about should we have more wind turbines, should we have all this? Because Thailand survived by petroleum industry in the sense of electricity. And that's a big key. But in the US, that becomes the answer of that, is the fact that, where are you? Especially, we're so happy. One thing that my wife always loved it here is being in Virginia. Virginia has the most impact by disaster when you look at it. So we have to actually kind of like put ourselves in the shoes of others in order to kind of like understand the climate change. So come in conclusion, the safety precaution that we put into all our new design, that's what drives all the costs right there. That new scale that's going to be built in Utah. Utah is not Nevada, but Utah municipal. Disagree with it because they don't make profit out of it. And Utah has a law of kind of like, this time I'll call wasteland. They rather put something else, like wind turbine, or something along the line. So something about that is because of safety. We put too many safety past the new scale itself have super excellent passive safety. When I say passive safety in this case means if something meant to happen, it'll happen naturally to block that. And once you keep building a lot of it, you're building too many precaution layer. It's almost like you're building your home with a lot of safety layer. Eventually capital costs driving down, and then it doesn't make profit. And a lot of profit from nuclear have to be in the future costs. But we live in the current generation where we drive by day-to-day basis. everyone who actually study economic, when I teach economic in my class, because I teach nuclear economic in 453. When we teach that, I always say, anyone worry about 10 years in the future? Things like that. That would be the big key component. We always look at now. So that safety-wise, I don't see any problem after that, yes.
Can I refine my question, not to be around safety? I think nuclear is a very safe form of
Yes.
energy, but more about prohibiting operation. So, like, the example I gave was that EDF had to, I guess, for lack of a better word, spin down all of their reactors because the baseline water temperatures were too hot to discharge water. So, like, what areas of failure are you worried about there with the worsening climate that prohibits the operation of these?
Oh, okay. I think the reverse the question, limited the operator to actually deal with the situation. We really running low in the term of the fact that we don't have so many nuclear operators to work on to this topics area. And I think when I read through the EDF issue, mainly is they're running low on having turnover and have to satisfy the safety that the person can be there and work regularly on hours to do the work. So in that sense, in any type of working, we run low on the number of operators. Is that answering on?
I think it's starting to get there. My understanding of the issue, and I'm sure you're more experienced than me, wasn't that it was operations of facilities were constrained by labor or work, but necessarily like the natural environment and not being able to discharge coolant water.
So I
Probably.
the
We
heat
don't-
sink.
I think we're both moving on.
Okay. I can talk to you more on heat sink issue. Yeah.
Steve, I'd like to bring up Steve Yaris. He's a former executive committee member of our group, and it was his idea that this be the topic of a program. Come on up. Ask.
I got a question. I've been following China. I understand last month they announced they met in Paris Peace Accord, the only major country to do it. And they've got 23 power plants in construction. And by 35, they hope to be completely off of solar, off of fossil fuels. And the fact that they're gonna have free power. The government's paying for it all. So all their companies are gonna have free power. I don't see how we can compete with them.
To be honest, I don't see how we can compete with them either. That result, typically the reason of that is in fact, again, it's about the drive by the country, federal government on the policy goal.
Next question from Mary.
Hey, so my question's for you, Bob. So renewable energy is booming and becoming much more modernized, and you said that there are many ways to generate energy, but our electricity storage is lagging by a decade in terms of its technology and deployment. You know, if we need baseload energy, are we going to be prepared without a baseload energy source in Virginia? We're only going renewable and thinking of totally phasing out nuclear.
Okay, so you said electricity storage, you talking like batteries mainly?
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I mean, we need, not just Virginia, every state, every country needs base load. And again, that's really the biggest reason why Sierra Club did not oppose extending our existing nuclear plants decades beyond what they were supposed to, be operating at. But yes, long term, I think batteries do give us some base load. I do think geothermal can give us base load. Hydro, not so much in Virginia, but hydro obviously can give you base load. Nuclear is going to be part of the puzzle for a while. Eventually, is there a time when we wind it down? Maybe. I'm not even worried about that because that is going to be decades away. I'm much more worried about getting rid of the last coal plants and really getting serious about unwinding these gas plants because that's all unequivocally bad. And so the nuclear, we're just, I'm really glad to hear about the safety and some of the other positive features. I'm not, anti-nuclear per se. And it's a huge baseload source for Virginia. It's going to be probably for the next 40 plus years. But you mentioned storage, and I think long-term, after I'm probably gone, that'll become a major base load source as well.
I want to just say something here. This project was proposed as addressing the issue of climate change as nuclear as a possible solution or distraction. Fundamentally, how we solve this problem can be discussed, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. But we got to address climate change. We've got to address climate change. And right now, our politicians are not doing that. They're not doing it in the United States. They're not doing it across the globe. Even China probably doing a little bit better job in some respects, but they're still building coal plants too. So we have to address climate change. And I say this to a lot of people I speak to. It's like when I go into one of these meetings with a bunch of elected officials, okay, you have to bring up the issue of climate change. You need to make it important to them. Because if I'm the one who says it, it's Glenn always talks about climate change, right? You need to say, I care about climate change because I'm concerned about my children. I'm concerned about the people not only in Florida, but the people right now, in Eastern Europe, serious flooding. In Africa, extreme flooding. Apparently it's going on in Thailand right now too. I mean, across the globe, people are dying because of climate change. If you're concerned about forest fires, right? If you're concerned about immigration, which Trump seems to be obsessed with, what's driving a lot of the immigration? Literally, there's a projection that 10 million people in Bangladesh are going to have to relocate in the next 15 to 20 years, okay? India has already built a fence. They already have a fence to keep people from Bangladesh coming into India. That's 10 or 15 million people that will be on the move. You look at Central America and the impacts of climate change there in terms of drought and disasters and such. We have to insist on action on climate change. There are solutions. Maybe nuclear is one of them, but we know wind and solar and storage are part of it too. But we have to, you have to insist that our elected officials get off their asses and address climate change. Because they're not doing, Democrats aren't doing it, Republicans even deny it's a problem, but Democrats aren't doing enough. You need to insist on this. You have to say, you gotta solve this problem. We've gotta address these issues. We've gotta reduce carbon. Do it, do it. And I'll just mention, you gotta insist the utility do it too, because Dominion Energy is gonna come out with their plan next week, on the 15th of October, and probably they're gonna say the same thing they did last year, and that's that they plan to double the climate emissions. Double them. They're saying, the hell with the climate, we don't care. We'll build wind and solar, but we're still gonna double our climate emissions by building more gas plants. So you're gonna have to stand up and say, hell no, we're not gonna take it anymore. You gotta do it.
That is a great last word. Let's have a round of applause for all three of them. And now the only thing standing between you and some refreshments is announcements. If somebody would like to make an announcement, please come up to the stage, sit in these chairs. The first two things we're going to talk about have to do with VCU. They are VCU events. Aries is going to describe the first one, which is tomorrow.
Hey, this is not a VCU event. This is actually being run. Oh, sorry. This is not a VCU event, but it's actually being run by Equate, a Quaker organization, and SOS, Save Our Ships. And it's actually going to be a day of action outside Dominion Energy. It's going to be at 600 East Canal Street tomorrow at 4:30 to 6 p.m. Essentially, no new gas plants. Hope to see you guys there.
Melissa, come on up.
Another gas
This is
plant.
not VCU.
Yeah, with Mothers Out Front, we're working with Equate on that event. We will have signs for everybody to come out at 4:30, and it'll be a really important event. There's also one at the Varina Library at 6:30. We're going to have speakers from Friends of Chesterfield, the Chesterfield NAACP, Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action. Where they have resited the gas plant, the proposed gas plant is right across the river from the Varina area. And so I don't think residents there are aware yet that they're going to be impacted now that Dominion's moved the plant. So I'm happy to have you out there.
We have a VCU, the Green Futures Workshop. Please attend if you can. I ask that if you can attend, take out grad students from the environmental sustainable Sustainable Energy and Environment and Urban Studies have put this program together. It's two parts to it. So one of them has a survey. So I asked if you can go to our newsletter. You can find the links also on Facebook, Instagram. And like I say, go into the website and look up. There's two parts to it. There's a survey. The students are trying to find out how much people understand about climate action planning. And what you understand about it, there's questions if you can ask those. And then the second part of that is that if you can attend the workshop on Saturday from 11 to 2, and there'll be a panel of speakers there. There'll be a couple of presentations for people to understand and get involved more in climate action planning. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I always forget to mention that we offer our speakers an honorarium of $50 each time to any organization that they would like it to go to. And tonight, Shippee has asked that his go to Sunrise Movement. He asked that his go to the Southern Environmental Law Center. I asked that his go to the Sierra Club. Right up in the back, Aileen mentioned newsletter. You too can get by email a lovely, colorful newsletter like this one with everything that's going on. Now, hold on, there is more announcements. All right, something is happening 4 weeks from tonight. What is that? Election. Thank you. Yes, election. And some things are happening before then connected to that. Specifically starting this Saturday, all right? The good news is we have pizza for you. The bad news is not tonight. If you come out this Saturday or Sunday or the following Saturday, that's the 12th, the 13th, the 19th of October at noon to different places around the city, we are canvassing for city council, thank you, city council candidates that we have endorsed. There is a flyer about this on the back table. What this means is we're going to eat pizza and then we're going to go knock on doors for these people. These people are working hard to make a better city for us if they get onto city council. And we have endorsed them. We want to make this happen. These are coming.
RSVP, so we know how much pizza to get.
What's that?
RSVP, so we know how much pizza.
RSVP, you can talk to me, you can talk to Kevin, or we have flyers and they will give you Lee Williams' contact information. Thank you very much. And Glenn would like to make an announcement.
So, regarding this gas plant that Dominion wants to build, it's the camel's nose on the tent. It's their down payment on their doubling their climate pollution. Those are their numbers, not mine. They want to double their climate pollution at a time when we need to be cutting it, okay? When I said politicians are not taking responsibility, a good example of that is Chesterfield County. The Board of Supervisors there has refused to even have a hearing on a gas plant that Dominion wants to build there. And so we're having a people's hearing, and there's flyers on the back, there's large and small. October the 29th, okay, we're going to have a hearing, a people's hearing, where we're going to take testimony from you all, okay, on this gas plant. And it's going to be at Thomasdale High School West Campus. So pick up the flyer, RSVP, come out there and make sure you let the politicians know you don't want a gas plant because we have to address climate change. Thank you.
September 19th is a busy day. There are at least 3 events I know. October. We can't go back. We won't go back. All right. October 19th. October 19th, there are 3 events. There is the aforementioned canvassing for candidates at noon. There is a hike at Verona Land Lab at 9:30 a.m. See this? You can do them all. And there is the Plant Native Festival at Dory Park where we will have a table. A wonderful, wonderful event about native plants. All right. Seeing nobody else. If you have batteries, drop them in this bucket back here. If seeing nothing else, I thank you again for coming out tonight. And we will be back here in this room 5 weeks from tonight. 5 weeks from tonight. Yes, there'll be a lot to talk about, and we are going to have the Office of Sustainability, Richmond's Office of Sustainability Director, Laura Thomas, as a speaker that night. I'm going to finish with a couple of appreciations. As Shippee said, you know, a party has to have people behind the scenes, and the people who helped make this meeting possible and put the refreshments out there are Nancy Patterson, Aileen Rivera, November 12th, please, we invite you, and stick around tonight, enjoy each other's company.